says on your handouts, I'm Martin Kaiser, and I work for Medical Liability Mutual Insurance Company. We're the company that protects the practice, the employees, and the providers for professional liability issues, which is malpractice. And I was asked to come talk a little bit about documentation today, and I had to make a big jump, not just for this practice, but it's been slowly coming. I made the jump from a paper presentation to an electronic, and I mean topic presentation, because you guys are all electronic now, right? No more handwriting or limited handwriting, okay? That's a good thing, all right? But we're gonna talk about documentation from that viewpoint today. Where do you all work? I see a lot of clinical outfits, so we have MAs and nurses here, right?
Yes.
We have clerical folks here, secretaries, business, okay. Front end people? Okay, discharge people? Okay, all right. Do I look familiar to any of you?
Thanks. A little bit.
I'm a patient of yours.
Oh.
Okay. So you don't recognize this? You recognize this? That's me.
Oh, gee, okay.
Up close in person.
So yes, I have been seen by Dr. Kaufman for years. And
Shame I didn't get that on video.
Dr. Perkins more recently, okay? So I will say once in a while I have to clear my throat, okay? That's a clinical thing. But we're going to talk about documentation, and I got to fight that now. The air conditioning just came on. But I started out by asking, what is documentation, okay? And it's your tool to use to talk between each other. Front end, through clinical, to the providers, right through to the discharge folks and the billing folks, okay? This is your tool to document patient care, okay? I'll ask the question, has anyone ever had to go to court? You don't have to tell me why. I'll tell you right now that it's not a fun place to be. It's the last place you ever want to have to go to throughout your career, all right? I've done a similar program to nursing schools and even to Albany Medical College, and I tell those young people as they're entering the profession that you don't ever want to go to court. So documentation is one way for you, good documentation is one way for you to stay out of the courtroom, because it's not a nice place to be. It captures the care rendered and the outcome, all right? It provides proof that you did what you said you were going to do for the patient. It supports conformity, or maybe the lack of conformity to policies, procedures, rules, and regulations, all right? The plaintiff's attorneys, and I'm going to use the generic name E. Stewart Jones. Everybody heard of E. Stewart Jones? One of the Capital District's big plaintiff's attorneys. He's always in the newspaper, okay? Stewart Jones looks at the medical record to determine whether or not you have done what you said you were going to do for the patient, okay? And that's what the record does for you, all right? But what is beyond the paper record of years gone by? Okay, you are now in an electronic world, so I'm asking, what is beyond the page? What is beyond the paper? Well, it's still, it's still a legal document used by both sides. The first step of any lawsuit is for the plaintiff's attorney to ask the practice for a certified copy of the medical record. And we have to give it to them. It's their right to have your medical record. And they're going to have their employees, their experts, look at your medical record line by line by line to find weaknesses in the record, okay? It demonstrates adherence to the standard of care, the policies and procedures. The regulators review your medical records, okay? The New York State Department of Health, the New York State Education Department, they have access, okay? And they will come in here unannounced, by the way. They don't send a letter to Deb saying, we'll be there on Monday the 19th at 9 o'clock in the morning. They just walk in and they say, we want to see the medical record, okay? You have to give it to those folks. CMS, the feds, okay, Blue Cross Blue Shield, CEPHP, MVP, they all have access to what you are writing in the medical record, whether you are a front-end person or you're a clinical person in between, or if you're a discharge person. They're going to look at every word you typed into the medical record. As I said just now, it's used for reimbursement, it's documentation for quality improvement and risk management, okay, to try to find problems and correct problems before it becomes a lawsuit, all right? The lessons we've learned in the past, the paper world, okay, apply to the electronic world the same way. I came up with a little saying a few years ago. Pen and paper, mouse and keyboard, different tools, same strategies. So what we used to do in the paper world, we now do in the electronic world, okay? We've had to modify, tweak things a little bit, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today, okay? So what's beyond the page? The elements of professional liability. These are the things that Stu Jones has to prove to the court. He has to prove that you had a duty to protect the patient. Everyone agree? That's your duty? To protect the patient. That's easy for Stu Jones to prove. He has to prove that you deviated from the care. Whether it was an MA or a nurse or a doctor, you did something the wrong way. You deviated from the care. And that deviation caused harm to the patient, which in self was the proximate cause. That's all lawyerese. Okay, that's attorneyese. What they have to prove through your documentation is that you did something incorrectly, okay, and that it hurt the patient, all right? And that it resulted in some sort of a loss, you know, bills and loss of income and maybe emotional and physical loss. Okay, they have to prove all that in the courtroom. How do they prove it? Your documentation, okay? They tear the documentation apart word for word, looking for chinks in your armor, for weaknesses in the doctor's care, okay? And I'm going to be talking to the docs next month, okay? I'm coming back to talk to them, okay? So I ask, especially the clinical people in the room, does your documentation style protect you? Okay? How you're writing today, is it going to keep you out of the courtroom? Because Stuart Jones is not a stupid man. He's not going to come after a nurse's or an MA's or physician's documentation unless he thinks he's going to beat them, okay? That he thinks he's going to make points with the jury. And your documentation style, how you write, is very important. I'm not here today to get you guys to start writing a great American novel. If your documentation starts getting longer and longer and longer, I'm going to get a phone call from Debbie, and she's going to say, what did you tell my stand? Okay? You can do this very briefly, objectively, can't you? You can tell the story, all right? That word's going to pop up in a minute. So, what are the basics of documentation? It needs to be timely. Your recollection of the care that you gave the patient is going to be better when it's more timely, okay? Needs to be legible, okay? We're not writing that much anymore, but if you are writing anything, make sure it's legible, okay? Needs to be factual, okay? Just the basic facts of the care, and objective. But if you keep the 3 C's in mind, if you just keep your notes clear, concise, and complete, it's going to help your documentation, okay? And it applies to the civil, the lawsuit courtroom, and to the regulatory courtroom.